things that's part and parcel of the neoliberal project, or at least the effect of the neoliberal project, the dislocations that have happened with people. We're seeing record numbers of people seeking asylum, migrants at border conflicts. And so before I open up for questions, I wanted to get your thoughts on not simply those problems, but a kind of, I heard you backstage dismiss the description of populism, so I'd be curious as to what exactly you call it, but the nativist and I think quite frankly racist in some respects response to migration that we're seeing drive a lot of right-wing politics in the West at the moment, that is also capturing the imagination of working class people in our country, of course, with Donald Trump and Ben Carson, who just said to a major media outlet that he thinks that there's no way anyone who practices Islam should ever be the president. And he just thought that was an okay thing to say. So I'm curious as to how do you contextualize that nativist, right-wing, if not populist, I'd be curious as to how you describe it, response.
Well, there are differences between the United States and Europe. You take a look at American history. It's a society of immigrants. The indigenous population was destroyed, pretty advanced civilizations destroyed, eliminated, people exterminated. You had to fill the continent with people, so you had immigrants. But the racism goes right back to the beginning. Take, say, Benjamin Franklin, one of the most enlightened figures in the world at the time, a leader of the Enlightenment. He had views on immigration. He thought that Germans and Swedes should be excluded because they're too swarthy, literally, Germans and Swedes. There's a myth of Anglo-Saxonism that goes right through American history, right into the 20th century. People are coming from all over the place, but when they work their way into the society, they become Anglo-Saxons. Thomas Jefferson, when he founded the University of Virginia, that was to keep Southern gentlemen from being distorted by Harvard, But it was a law school, and they had to study Anglo-Saxon law because that's our roots, we're Anglo-Saxons. As it goes through, take, say, the Irish. When the Irish came to Boston, they were treated pretty much like blacks. You could see restaurants saying, no dogs in Irish and that sort of thing. In fact, some of it's really pretty hideous. If you take a look at the history of gynecology, a lot of it was developed at Harvard Medical School, and they needed subjects. So who are the subjects? Well, people who can be subjects, like black women and Irish women. You can try out the techniques. Sooner or later, the Irish worked themselves into the society. They became, the policemen, the bureaucrats, the president, and so on and so forth. And then they become Anglo-Saxons, and you want to keep out the others. The United States needed immigrants right through the 19th century. And apart from Oriental exclusion, which was blocked, it was open until 1924. And at that point, the first major immigration law was aimed at Italians and Jews. And with that, you get nativism. We don't want any more. We have what we got. We don't want any more. Nobody else should have it. And if you take a look at and it's not that the immigrants want to come here. They would like to stay in their own countries. In fact, if you take the Middle East, the massive of refugees are staying right there. There are countries that are absorbing huge numbers of refugees. In Lebanon, a small country, probably a quarter of the population are refugees. Iran has absorbed refugees. Jordan's absorbing them. Syria was absorbing them until it started to self-destruct. There are countries that absorb refugees. There are countries that generate refugees, like us. People are fleeing from Iraq The Iraq War created maybe 2 million refugees, and they're still fleeing from Afghanistan. So there are countries that absorb them, there are countries that generate them, there are countries that generate them and refuse to absorb them, like us, for example. And it's, now we're magnanimously taking in, 5,000 Syrians or something. But a lot of these are the result of kind of a sledgehammer hitting the region in the Iraq War, which incited sectarian conflicts that are now tearing the whole region apart. Or take, say, south of the border. If you've looked at the statistics when there was a so-called refugee crisis, immigration crisis a year ago or so, the largest number were coming from Honduras. Why Honduras? It's a poor country, but it was also hit by a sledgehammer. The government was overthrown, the democratic government, by a military coup. About the only country who supported it was the United States, indirectly, but supported it. And it turned into a monstrosity, and people are fleeing. As soon as first we create the situation in which they can't survive in their own country, then when they flee, we put them into, I don't know, it's pretty awful by the border. If they make it through the border and they don't get killed, they're stuck into trucks and sent back as if it was a concentration camp and dumped across the border to somehow take care of themselves if they can. And now we build, going to build a wall and so on. But then you can understand for people who are being under duress, and working people in the United States have had a pretty rotten time for 30 years or more, a generation. It's easy to try to find a reason that isn't the true reason, but that's kind of on the surface. It seems to make intuitive sense. They're taking our jobs. In fact, they're not. They're taking jobs that nobody wants to take, and they increase the economic level of the places where they are. But that's subtle. What you see is they're working and I'm not. Okay, must be their fault. And it's pretty easy for political figures, races, demagogues, the Trump types, to turn this into something that looks plausible. In Europe, it's even worse. I mean, I've always felt, all my life, in fact, that Europe is probably more racist than the United States. It doesn't show up as much in Europe because the societies tend to